Each of our lessons this morning makes reference to the end of days. Through the years, many have attempted to describe what the end of days will look like. And outside of the book of Revelations, Dante's Divine Comedy contains the most graphic descriptions. In today's gospel, Jesus and the apostles exited the temple in Jerusalem, and the 12 were astonished by its enormity. They were, after all, farmers, fishermen, and laborers, and it may well have been their first visit to Jerusalem. The first temple was built by Solomon in the 10th century B.C.E. and destroyed in 586 B.C.E. by the Babylonians. The temple of Jesus' time was rebuilt by Herod, who expanded the temple, adding a plaza, which we now know as the Temple Mount. The western wall is all that remains of the retaining wall, not actually a part of the temple itself. It's as high as 20-story building. Its stones weigh between 2 and 100 tons, with one weighing up to 400 tons. There is no mortar, and the stones fit so tightly that not even a piece of paper can fit between them. And this is just the retaining wall. What would the temple have looked like? It's not difficult to imagine the amazement of the apostles, but not as much as the shock of hearing what Jesus said to them. Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down. The disciples must have shook their heads. It must have been nearly impossible for them to imagine the destruction of the holiest place of the Jewish faith. But in the year 70 of the Common Era, the temple was leveled to the ground by Roman legions under the command of Titus, son of the Roman Emperor Vespasian. The impossible just happened, just as Jesus predicted. What we often fail to grasp is that the destruction of all things is inevitable. Of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, only the pyramids still stand. Plants, animals, even mankind, all have expiration dates. We're just renting space in God's creation. Jesus' lesson today reminds us of the impermanence of all things physical, even our own lives. And even the apostles wanted to know the signs of the end times. And they pressed Jesus, when will this be? Like most of Jesus' followers, they expected the end of days to occur during their own lifetimes. And even today, there are those who look for the signs as if knowing the end and when it will happen will change the outcome, or somehow give them a mastery over it. We're all dying. From the day we are born, we begin to die. Far too many are concerned about what might happen tomorrow, or next week, or next year. Instead, we should be concerned about what's happening right now, today, and how we might help. Remember 1978 and the People's Temple, Jonestown, Guyana? 909 died because one man, Jim Jones, believed it was the end times. And what about the Solar Temple in the 90s? They believed they were going to die and be transported to the star system of Sirius. And Marshall Applewhite's Heaven's Gate, who believed their suicide would transport their souls onto a spaceship that they believed was following the Hale-Bopp comet. And there are others, so many others, dating back to before the birth of Christ, all believing that the end of days was upon them. And of course it was, but only because they made their own predictions come true. For the rest, life continued. None of us here today are spring chickens, but if we worry about the end, we cannot also be doing God's work. A while back, a man at church asked me, "What can I do? I can hardly dress myself anymore." A caregiver does my shopping and drops me off at church. And I asked, "Can you still use a phone?" And he replied indignantly, "Of course I can." So can you occasionally call a few members to see how they're doing? And he did just that. And he invited his caregiver to church. You see, this man didn't think that he had anything to give. And he probably was feeling just a bit sorry for himself. He just had to be given the opportunity to utilize what limited resources he still had to offer to God. You see, God understands that each of us has limited abilities, some more than others, but each of us still retains some ability to accomplish what God expects of us. Only you and God knows what he expects of you. What I do know is that God doesn't want us to just sit around on our butts and let the world pass us by. Regardless of our human frailties, each of us still has an ability to do God's work. Eventually, we will all face the inevitable. But we shouldn't be consumed by it. Rather, let us continue to do what God called us to do while we are still able to do so. Amen.